The Elysian invasion fleet appeared in Earth's solar system, effortlessly bypassing humanity's outer defenses. Within hours, every nation on the planet faced an ultimatum: surrender or be destroyed. Admiral Karos, commander of the alien armada, broadcast his demand across all communication channels. People of Earth, your planet is now under Elysian control. 37 civilizations have already bowed to our supremacy. You will be no different. Surrender immediately or face annihilation. As Elysian ships positioned themselves above major cities worldwide, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session. Tensions ran high as world leaders debated their limited options. In low Earth orbit, decorated Marine Corps veteran and NASA astronaut Jake Brown received urgent orders to return from the International Space Station. Jake's capsule streaked through the atmosphere, leaving a fiery trail across the sky. As he parachuted down to a landing site in Kazakhstan, he watched Elysian vessels hovering ominously over the horizon. Within hours, he was on a military transport bound for Washington, D.C. The U.S. president, determined to show Earth wasn't defenseless, authorized a demonstration of military might. A barrage of nuclear missiles launched towards the Elysian fleet. Jake, now at the Pentagon, watched with other military advisors as the warheads approached their targets. In a devastating display of technological superiority, the Elysian ships activated energy shields, neutralizing the nuclear assault without a single detonation. Before the shocked silence could settle, the aliens retaliated. A blinding beam of energy lanced down from the sky, precisely carving away the faces of Mount Rushmore. The message was clear: Earth's most powerful weapons were useless, and no target was beyond the Elysians' reach. Panic spread across the globe. Governments struggled to maintain order as citizens either prepared for war or sought to surrender. The UN reconvened, casting a vote on Earth's response to the Elysian ultimatum. The result was 192-1 in favor of capitulation, with only the United States standing against surrender. Jake found himself summoned to the White House, ushered into the Oval Office by grim-faced Secret Service agents. The president, his face etched with worry, revealed a closely guarded secret: a classified military installation on the far side of the moon, housing experimental weapons and spacecraft reverse-engineered from a crashed alien ship recovered decades earlier. "Jake, you're our last hope," the president said, sliding a folder stamped "Top Secret" across the desk. "We need you to lead a covert mission to the lunar base. Assess our assets, deploy what you can against the Elysians. It's a long shot, but it's all we've got left." As Jake absorbed the weight of his new mission, reports flooded in from around the world. Country after country announced their surrender, with Elysian forces beginning occupation procedures. The clock was ticking. Jake and his yet-to-be-assembled team faced the monumental task of resisting an seemingly invincible alien force with untested, experimental technology. The fate of Earth hung in the balance. While other races had crumbled before the Elysian onslaught, humanity prepared to fight. In the face of overwhelming odds, Jake Brown and the United States stood resolute, embodying the spirit of resistance against alien conquest. The battle for Earth was about to begin, and humanity would not go quietly into the night. Jake Brown stood in the Oval Office, the weight of humanity's fate pressing down on his shoulders. He nodded grimly at the president, accepting the mission without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes, sir." Within hours, Jake found himself in a hidden facility beneath the Nevada desert. 4 elite operatives joined him, each handpicked for their unique skills. Sergeant Sarah Martinez, explosives expert; Lieutenant Michael Chang, tech specialist; Captain Alexei Volkov, sniper; and Dr. Emily Chen, xenobiologist. The team boarded a sleek black spacecraft unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Its smooth lines and matte surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Lieutenant Chang ran his hand over the controls, whistling softly. "Stealth tech reverse-engineered from the crashed alien ship will be practically invisible to Elysian sensors." As they launched, the sky above them shimmered with the hulking forms of Elysian warships. Through the view screen, Jake watched San Francisco shrink beneath them, alien vessels hovering ominously over the Golden Gate Bridge. Streams of smaller craft moved between the ships and the ground, methodically establishing control over the city. "My God," Sergeant Martinez murmured, her face pale. "They're really doing it, taking over." Jake gritted his teeth. "Not if we have anything to say about it." The journey to the moon was tense and silent, each team member lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the lunar surface, Captain Volkov pointed to a barely visible distortion in the stark landscape. There, the base entrance. Their ship glided into a hidden hangar, revealing a vast underground complex. As the team disembarked, a tall, thin man with wild gray hair approached them. "Welcome to Artemis Base," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Dr. Marcus Morales." Jake shook the scientist's hand. "Admiral Brown, we're here to see this weapon of yours, Doctor." Morales led them through winding corridors filled with humming machinery and holographic displays. They emerged into an enormous chamber dominated by a massive cannon-like device. "Behold," Morales said, pride evident in his voice, "the XK-7 particle beam cannon capable of penetrating Elysian shields like they're tissue paper." The team spent the next several hours familiarizing themselves with the base and the weapon. Jake was in the middle of a simulation when an urgent transmission came through from Earth. The holographic display showed cities worldwide in chaos as Elysian forces systematically dismantled human governments. "We're receiving reports of resistance in several locations," a haggard-looking military officer reported. "But the Elysians are responding with extreme prejudice. Civilian casualties are mounting." Jake's team exchanged grim looks. They redoubled their efforts, working tirelessly to prepare the particle beam cannon. Progress was swift until a deafening explosion rocked the base. Alarms blared as smoke filled the cannon chamber. Dr. Morales emerged from the haze, his face smudged with soot. "The main power coupling overloaded," he coughed. "We'll need to fabricate a replacement." "How long?" Jake demanded. Morales shook his head. 72 hours minimum." Before Jake could respond, another transmission cut through the chaos. The team watched in horror as a blinding beam of energy sliced through the Hoover Dam. The massive structure crumbled, unleashing a torrent of water that swept away everything in its path. "Admiral Karros is getting impatient," Lieutenant Chang said, his voice tight. "The U.S. is one of the last holdouts." Jake paced the room, mind racing. They needed more time, more information. An idea formed, dangerous and potentially suicidal, but possibly their only option. He turned to his team. "We're going to infiltrate one of their ships." The plan came together quickly. They would use their stealth craft, enhanced with experimental cloaking technology, to approach the nearest Elysian vessel. Jake, Martinez, and Chang would board the ship, gather intel, and return to the base. As they prepared to launch, Dr. Chen approached Jake. "Admiral," she said, handing him a small device. "This should help you interpret any alien language or data you encounter. Be careful." The stealth craft slipped out of the lunar base, creeping towards the looming form of an Elysian warship. Inside, Jake's heart pounded as they drew closer. The ship's enormous hull filled their view screen, its surface a maze of strange patterns and pulsing lights. "Cloaking technology holding," Chang reported, his fingers dancing over the controls. "No sign they've detected us." They located an airlock near what appeared to be a maintenance section. Martinez attached a device to the outer hull, bypassing the alien security protocols. With a soft hiss, the airlock opened. Jake turned to his team, noting the commitment in their eyes. "Remember," he said softly, "we're here for intel only. We get in, we get out. The fate of Earth depends on us not getting caught." They nodded, weapons ready. Jake took a deep breath and stepped into the alien ship, keenly aware that their next actions could determine the future of human civilization. Jake led the way into the Elysian warship, his heart pounding as they slipped through the airlock. The interior was a maze of sleek, curved corridors bathed in an eerie blue light. Strange symbols pulsed along the walls, and the air hummed with an otherworldly energy. "Stay close," Jake whispered to Sarah and Michael. "We need to find their central control room." They moved silently through the ship, ducking into alcoves whenever they heard the approaching footsteps of Elysian crew members. The aliens were tall, pale beings with elongated limbs and large, dark eyes. Their movements were unnaturally fluid, almost robotic. After what felt like hours of tense navigation, they reached a large chamber filled with holographic displays. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he took in the scene before them. The screens showed real-time footage of Earth's cities under siege. Elysian ships hovered over familiar landmarks, their weapons carving paths of destruction. "My God," Sarah murmured, her eyes wide as she watched New York's skyline crumble. Michael wasted no time. He approached a control panel, attaching a small device to its surface. "I'm in," he announced after a moment, "downloading everything I can." Jake and Sarah stood guard while Michael worked, their eyes darting between the displays and the chamber's entrance. As data streamed into their device, Jake noticed something odd on one of the screens. He stepped closer, squinting at the image of what appeared to be a laboratory. "Michael," he called softly, "nice, can you pull up more information on this?" Michael's fingers flew over the alien interface. Suddenly, the chamber filled with a three-dimensional hologram detailing the Elysians' biological makeup. Jake's eyes widened as he absorbed the information. "They're artificial," he breathed, "genetically engineered by some ancient race." Sarah joined them, her face pale in the blue light. "That explains their uniformity, their advanced tech. They're purpose-built for conquest." As they delved deeper into the Elysian database, Jake stumbled upon another crucial piece of information. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a complex diagram. "Their neural structure, it's vulnerable to a specific EM frequency." Before they could discuss the implications of this discovery, a shrill alarm pierced the air. Red lights pulsed along the walls, and the sound of running footsteps echoed from the corridor. "We've been made," Sarah hissed, raising her weapon. Jake grabbed the data device, securing it in his suit. "Time to go. Michael, lead the way back to the airlock." They burst out of the control room, immediately coming face to face with a squad of Elysian guards. The aliens raised their weapons, strange energy rifles that crackled with power. "Down!" Jake yelled, diving to the side as a blast of energy scorched the wall where he'd been standing. Sarah returned fire, her stolen Elysian weapon sending bolts of blue energy down the corridor. 2 guards fell, their bodies twitching with residual energy. The team fought their way back through the ship, using their combat training and Earth-honed instincts against the more regimented Elysian forces. They moved as one, covering each other's blind spots and taking advantage of every piece of cover. As they neared the airlock, a stray energy blast caught Sarah in the side. She stumbled, crying out in pain. "Sarah!" Jake turned back, firing cover shots as he pulled her to her feet. "I'm fine," she gritted out, though her face was pale with shock. "Keep moving." They reached the airlock, Michael working frantically to bypass the sealed door, while Jake and Sarah held off the pursuing Elysians. With a hiss, the door slid open, and they tumbled into their stealth craft. "Go, go, go!" Jake shouted as Michael slammed his hand on the launch controls. The craft detached from the Elysian ship, its cloaking technology sputtering as it absorbed multiple energy blasts. They shot away from the massive warship, alarms blaring inside their small vessel. "Stealth systems compromised," Michael reported, his fingers dancing over the controls. "They can track us now." Through the view screen, they watched in horror as the Elysian fleet turned its attention to Earth's remaining military installations. Energy beams lanced down from the ships, vaporizing hardened bunkers and missile silos. "They know we're not done fighting," Jake said grimly. "We need to get back to the lunar base fast." The journey back was tense, with Sarah fighting to stay conscious as Jake applied emergency first aid. When they finally touched down in the hidden hangar, Dr. Morales was waiting for them, his face etched with concern. "What happened? We lost contact." Jake cut him off, helping Sarah out of the craft. "Get her to medical. We've got intel and a potential weapon against the Elysians, but we need to move fast." As Sarah was rushed to the infirmary, Jake and Michael briefed Dr. Morales and the rest of the team on their findings. The scientists immediately set to work, modifying the particle beam cannon to emit the specific electromagnetic frequency that affected Elysian neural functions. Hours passed in a flurry of activity. Jake paced the control room, watching the holographic displays as more and more of Earth fell under Elysian control. A blinking alert caught his attention. Long-range sensors detecting a massive energy signature approaching the solar system. Dr. Morales, Jake called, his voice tight. What am I looking at here? The scientist hurried over, his face paling as he analyzed the data. It's another fleet, much larger than the current invasion force. Based on their speed, they'll be here in less than 48 hours. A heavy silence fell over the control room. Jake's mind raced, formulating a plan. The particle beam cannon, he said finally. What's its range? Limited to lunar orbit, Dr. Morales replied. We can't hit Earth directly. Jake nodded, a determined glint in his eye. Then we bring the fight to them. We use the cannon to disable the ships in orbit, then commandeer one of their vessels. We can use it to bring the modified weapon to Earth. The team exchanged looks, the audacity of the plan sinking in. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it was their best chance. We need to move fast, Jake continued, before they find this base and before those reinforcements arrive. It's now or never. As the lunar base erupted into frantic preparation, Jake received an unexpected transmission. His brother's face appeared on the screen, haggard but alive. Jake. Alex's voice crackled through the speakers. We're still fighting down here. Guerrilla resistance in the Rockies, coordinating with other groups worldwide. We haven't given up. Jake felt a surge of pride and persistence. Hold on, little brother. We're coming with a way to end this. Just give us a little more time. As he ended the transmission, Jake turned to see Sarah limping into the control room, her side bandaged but her eyes fierce. Don't even think about leaving me behind, she said before he could speak. Jake nodded, knowing better than to argue. He looked around at his team, Sarah, Michael, Dr. Morales, and the others, all ready to risk everything for this one chance to save humanity. All right, he said, his voice steady. Let's get to work. We've got a planet to save. Jake's fingers flew over the alien controls, activating the particle beam cannon. The air in the lunar base control room crackled with tension as the team held their breath, waiting for the outcome. A brilliant beam of energy lanced out from the lunar surface, striking the nearest Elysian cruiser. The effect was instantaneous. The massive ship's lights flickered and died, its engines sputtering out as it began to drift aimlessly in orbit. Direct hit! Sarah exclaimed, her eyes wide with disbelief. It worked! Jake didn't waste a moment celebrating. Target the next ship, he ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. In quick succession, they disabled 3 more Elysian vessels. The remaining alien ships, caught off guard by this unexpected assault, began evasive maneuvers. Their once orderly formation dissolved into chaos as they struggled to identify the source of the attack. Keep firing, Jake commanded, watching the holographic display as it tracked the alien fleet's movements. Don't give them a chance to regroup. As the particle beam cannon continued its relentless assault, Jake turned to Sarah and Michael. It's time. We need to move now while they're disorganized. The 3 of them raced to the hangar, where a small stealth craft waited. As they prepared for launch, Dr. Morales' voice crackled over the comms. Jake, be careful out there. We'll keep the cannon firing to cover your approach, but we don't know how long we can hold them off. Understood, Jake replied, strapping himself into the pilot's seat. Just keep them busy as long as you can. The stealth craft shot out of the lunar base, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. Jake piloted the ship with practiced precision, weaving through the debris of destroyed Elysian vessels and dodging energy blasts from the aliens' defensive fire. They approached one of the disabled cruisers, its massive hull looming before them. Jake maneuvered the craft to an airlock near what they hoped was the ship's bridge. Ready? he asked, glancing at Sarah and Michael. They nodded, faces set with drive. The moment they breached the airlock, they were met with resistance. Disoriented Elysian crew members, their movements jerky and uncoordinated due to the electromagnetic pulse, fired wildly at the human intruders. Jake ducked behind a bulkhead, returning fire with his modified weapon. Sarah and Michael spread out, creating a crossfire that quickly overwhelmed the Elysian defenders. "Move!" Jake shouted, leading the charge down the alien corridor. They fought their way through the ship, the layout eerily similar to the vessel they had infiltrated earlier. This time, however, they moved with purpose and familiarity, quickly neutralizing any resistance they encountered. Finally, they reached the bridge. The doors slid open to reveal a scene of confusion. Elysian officers struggled with malfunctioning consoles, their usual calm demeanor replaced by evident panic. Jake's team made short work of the bridge crew. As the last Elysian fell, Jake approached the main control interface. "Dr. Morales, we're in," he reported over the comms. "Talk us through this." The scientist's voice guided them through the complex alien systems. Michael's fingers danced over the controls, his earlier experience with Elysian technology proving invaluable. Suddenly, the ship hummed to life around them. Lights flickered on, and the view screen came alive with a dizzying array of data. "We have propulsion and weapons," Michael announced, a note of triumph in his voice. Before they could celebrate, an urgent transmission came through from the lunar base. Dr. Morales' face appeared on the screen, his expression grim. "Jake, we're under heavy attack," he reported, the image shaking as explosions rocked the base. "The remaining Elysian ships have figured out our location. We're holding them off for now, but I don't know how long we can last." Jake's mind raced, weighing their options. "Keep the cannon firing, Doctor. We're going to draw their fire away from you." With Michael at the helm, they maneuvered the stolen cruiser out of orbit. The ship responded sluggishly at first, but as Michael grew more comfortable with the controls, their movements became smoother. They dove into the fray, using the Elysian ship's own weapons against its former allies. The element of surprise worked in their favor, allowing them to deal significant damage before the other ships realized what was happening. As they fought, Jake kept one eye on the tactical display showing Earth. The planet was surrounded by a sea of Elysian vessels, their number far greater than he had imagined. "We need to get down there," he muttered, more to himself than the others. Just then, a familiar voice crackled over the comms. "Jake, do you read me?" "Alex," Jake exclaimed, recognizing his brother's voice. "Are you okay? What's the situation down there?" "We're hanging on," Alex replied, his voice strained. "But we need help. The Resistance is planning a global uprising, but we need air support. Can you target the Elysian command ships?" Jake exchanged glances with Sarah and Michael. "We're on it," he assured his brother. "Just tell us where to hit them." As they approached Earth's orbit, Jake's team launched a series of lightning strikes against the Elysian fleet. They used their inside knowledge of Elysian weaknesses to maximum effect, disabling ship after ship with precision attacks. The Elysian fleet, caught off guard by this new threat, began to break formation. Confusion spread through their ranks as more ships fell to the modified particle beam weapon. On the ground, the human resistance seized the opportunity. Reports flooded in from around the globe of successful attacks against Elysian ground forces. Key strategic locations were reclaimed, and Earth's remaining military forces joined the fight with renewed vigor. As Jake's team continued their assault from orbit, they received an urgent transmission from Dr. Morales. His face appeared on the interface, his expression a mix of relief and dread. "Jake, good news and bad news," he said, his voice tense. "The lunar base is secure for now. We've managed to repel the Elysian attack, but our long-range sensors have picked up something alarming. The Elysian reinforcement fleet you discovered earlier? It's less than 12 hours away from Earth." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. They had made significant progress, but this new threat could undo everything they had accomplished. "We need a plan," Sarah said, voicing what they were all thinking. Jake stared at the tactical display, his mind racing. The stolen Elysian cruiser, the modified particle beam technology, the approaching reinforcements. Suddenly, an idea began to form. What if we could take out the entire reinforcement fleet at once? He asked, turning to his team. We use this ship to get close, then broadcast the disruptive EM frequency across their entire fleet. Michael's eyes widened as he grasped the implications. It could work, he said slowly, but we'd have to get dangerously close to pull it off. Before they could discuss further, another transmission came through. It was Alex again, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. Jake, we're in trouble, he said, the sound of explosions in the background. The Elysians are regrouping. They're launching counterattacks in major cities worldwide. We're being pushed back, and we don't have the resources to hold out much longer. Jake's mind focused. They were so close to turning the tide, but time was running out. He made his decision. Alex, hold on as long as you can, he said. We're going to take out their reinforcements before they can reach Earth. It's our only chance. As Alex's transmission cut out, Jake turned to his team. Their faces showed a mix of persistence and apprehension, mirroring his own feelings. Set a course for the outer solar system, he ordered Michael. We're going to intercept that fleet. As the stolen Elysian cruiser accelerated away from Earth, leaving the ongoing battle behind, Jake couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. They were heading into unknown danger, with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. The vast emptiness of space stretched out before them, holding both promise and peril. Somewhere out there, the Elysian Armada was approaching, unaware of the small band of humans racing to meet them in a final risky move for Earth's freedom. Freedom. As the ship accelerated, Jake felt the enormity of their mission weighing on him. The fate of humanity rested on their ability to neutralize the incoming Elysian Armada. Hours passed in tense silence as they journeyed deeper into the solar system. Michael expertly piloted the stolen cruiser, his fingers dancing across the alien controls with growing confidence. Sarah monitored the long-range sensors, her eyes scanning for any sign of the enemy fleet. Contact, she announced suddenly, her voice cutting through the quiet. Multiple signatures detected at the edge of the Kuiper Belt. Jake leaned forward, studying the holographic display. His breath caught in his throat as the sheer scale of the Elysian reinforcements became clear. Thousands of warships filled the screen, their formation stretching as far as the sensors could detect. My God, Michael whispered, there's so many of them. Jake steeled himself, pushing aside the flicker of doubt. Activate the cloaking technology, he ordered. We need to get closer without being detected. The ship shimmered and seemed to fade from view as Michael engaged the advanced stealth systems. They approached the massive armada cautiously, weaving between the outlying ships with practiced precision. As they neared the heart of the fleet, Jake opened a secure channel to Earth. Alex, do you read me? His brother's voice came through, tinged with static. Jake, where are you? We're about to engage the Elysian reinforcements, Jake explained quickly. Listen carefully. We're going to attempt to disable their entire fleet at once. You need to prepare for the possibility of thousands of unpowered ships entering Earth's atmosphere. Some may crash land. Be ready. There was a moment of silence before Alex responded, his voice tense but steady. Understood. We'll do what we can. Good luck, brother. Jake turned to his team. This is it. Sarah, prepare to broadcast the EM frequency. Michael, position us at the center of their formation. The stolen cruiser glided silently through the Elysian fleet, unnoticed by the massive warships surrounding them. Jake's heart pounded as they reached the optimal position, their small vessel dwarfed by the colossal alien ships. Now, Jake commanded. Sarah activated the modified particle beam technology. A wave of invisible energy pulsed outward from their ship, spreading rapidly through the Elysian fleet. The effect was immediate and dramatic. All around them, Elysian ships began to lose power. Their lights flickered and died, engines sputtered out, and weapon systems went offline. Through the view screen, Jake watched as the once orderly formation dissolved into chaos, ships drifting aimlessly in the void of space. For a moment, it seemed they had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. Then Sarah's voice cut through the growing elation. "Jake, we have a problem." She pointed to a massive vessel at the center of the fleet. Unlike the other ships, it showed no signs of power loss. Its lights remained steady, its engines still active. The flagship, Jake realized. It must have better shielding. Before they could react, the Elysian flagship launched a devastating counterattack. Energy weapons of terrifying power lashed out, striking their stolen cruiser with pinpoint accuracy. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring as systems failed under the assault. "Shields at 20% and falling," Michael reported, his voice strained as he fought to keep the ship steady. Jake's mind raced, assessing their rapidly dwindling options. Another direct hit rocked the ship, and he knew they couldn't withstand much more. "Abandon ship," he ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Everyone to the escape pods, now!" As his team scrambled to obey, Jake input a final set of commands into the ship's navigation system. He set the crippled cruiser on a collision course with the Elysian flagship, hoping to cause enough damage to buy Earth more time. Jake was the last to reach the escape pods, launching just as another barrage from the flagship struck their vessel. He watched through the small viewport as their commandeered ship hurtled towards its target, erupting in a massive explosion as it collided with the Elysian behemoth. The impact sent shockwaves through the nearby ships, disabling several and creating a ripple of chaos through the Elysian fleet. But Jake's elation was short-lived. The flagship, though damaged, remained operational. Their escape pods hurtled through space, buffeted by the aftermath of the explosion. Jake saw Triton, Neptune's largest moon, looming before them. It was their only hope for survival in this remote corner of the solar system. The landing was rough. Jake's pod slammed into the icy surface of Triton, skidding across the frozen landscape before coming to a stop. He forced the hatch open, immediately assaulted by the moon's extreme cold. His breath froze in the thin atmosphere as he activated his suit's emergency beacon. Jake scanned the horizon, searching for signs of his team. In Triton's low gravity, distant objects seemed closer than they were, distorting his sense of scale. He spotted a pod several kilometers away and began the arduous process of making his way towards it. Hours passed as Jake trudged across Triton's icy surface. The intense cold seeped through his suit, and he found himself longing for the relative warmth of the lunar base. Finally, he reached the other pod, relief washing over him as he saw Sarah emerging from it. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice sounding strange in the thin atmosphere. Sarah nodded, her face pale but determined behind her helmet's faceplate. "I'm okay. Any sign of Michael?" Before Jake could respond, a flash of light caught his attention. Another emergency beacon far off in the distance. "There," he pointed. "Let's go." As they made their way towards the third pod, Jake's mind raced with the enormity of their situation. They were stranded on a distant moon, billions of kilometers from Earth, with no clear way to return. And yet, they had dealt a significant blow to the Elysian forces. He could only hope it would be enough to give the resistance on Earth a fighting chance. The reunion with Michael was bittersweet. They were alive, but lost in one of the most inhospitable environments in the solar system. As they huddled together, conserving heat and assessing their limited supplies, Jake spotted something on the horizon, a structure barely visible against Triton's icy landscape. "Look," he said, pointing, "that's not natural." Sarah squinted, then her eyes widened in recognition. "It's a building, but how? Who could have built something out here?" As they approached the mysterious structure, its nature became clear. It was a research station, a relic of early human space exploration, long abandoned, but still standing against Triton's harsh elements. Jake felt a surge of hope as they forced open the airlock. This unexpected discovery might be more than just their salvation. It could be the key to turning the tide of the war. Inside the station, they found old but potentially useful equipment: communication arrays, power generators, even rudimentary fabrication tools. As Jake examined a dusty console, his mind began to form the outline of a plan. "We can use this," he said, his voice filled with growing excitement. "If we can repair the long-range communicator, we might be able to contact Earth. And with these tools, we could even create more of the EM weapons." Sarah and Michael looked at him, hope kindling in their eyes. They all knew the odds were stacked against them, but they had come too far to give up now. As they set to work, Jake couldn't help but wonder about the situation back on Earth. Had their attack on the Elysian fleet made a difference? Was his brother still fighting? The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and they were light years away from the action. But Jake pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. They had found an unexpected advantage here on Triton, and he was determined to make the most of it. The war was just getting started, and they were not out of the fight yet. Jake's fingers flew across the antiquated control panel, coaxing life into long-dormant systems. The research station's communication array hummed to life, its dish slowly rotating to align with Earth's distant position. "We're online," Sarah announced, her voice tight with anticipation. "Transmitting on all frequencies." Static filled the air, punctuated by bursts of unintelligible chatter. Jake held his breath, silently willing someone to hear their call. Suddenly, a familiar voice crackled through the speakers. "This is Dr. Morales. Identify yourself." Jake's heart leaped. "Dr. Morales, it's Jake. We're on Triton. Is Alex there?" There was a pause, then Alex's voice came through, thick with emotion. "Jake, my God, we thought you were dead." Quickly, Jake relayed their situation and the partial success of their mission against the Elysian fleet. The electromagnetic pulse worked on most of their ship, and he explained, but their flagship was somehow shielded against it. "That explains a lot," Dr. Morales interjected. "The Elysians have regrouped faster than we anticipated. Their flagship is coordinating their counteroffensive." As they spoke, Michael worked at another console, poring over data from the station's sensors. His eyes widened. "Jake, you need to see this." On the screen, a detailed schematic of the Elysian flagship appeared. Michael pointed to a pulsing red node at the ship's center. "That's their main power core. It's heavily shielded from external attacks, but look here." He highlighted a series of narrow conduits leading to the core. "These maintenance tunnels lead directly to it. They're not shielded internally." Jake's mind raced with the implications. "If we could get inside..." "We could take out the entire ship," Sarah finished. Jake turned back to the communication array. "Did you get all that, Dr. Morales?" "Affirmative," the scientist replied. "This could be the key we've been looking for, but how will you get there?" Jake's gaze fell on a bulky shape covered in protective tarps. "I think I have an idea." Over the next few hours, Jake's team worked feverishly to repurpose the station's old shuttle. They salvaged technology from their Elysian escape pods, jury-rigging a cloaking device and upgrading the propulsion systems. As they prepared for launch, Alex's voice came through once more. "Jake, we've got some news. Dr. Morales has finished developing portable EMP weapons. We're distributing them to resistance cells worldwide." Jake felt a surge of hope. "That's exactly what we need. Keep them distracted while we make our approach." The modified shuttle shuddered as it lifted off from Triton's icy surface. Jake gripped the controls, guiding them out of Neptune's orbit and towards the inner solar system. The journey was tense, their cobbled-together cloaking device flickering dangerously as they navigated through fields of disabled Elysian ships. As Earth came into view, Jake's breath caught in his throat. The planet's night side was ablaze with the lights of ongoing battles. Flashes of weapons fire illuminated the clouds, a stark reminder of the war raging below. "Multiple contacts," Michael warned, eyes fixed on the sensor display. "Elysian patrols at 2 o'clock. Jake banked the shuttle hard, cutting power to all non-essential systems. They drifted, the cloaking device their only protection as the Elysian ships passed within meters of their position. Finally, they reached low Earth orbit. A small, nondescript craft approached, matching their velocity. Shuttle Epsilon, this is resistance control. A voice crackled over the radio. Prepare for docking and supply transfer. As the two vessels connected, Jake received a briefing on the situation below. The Elysian flagship had descended into the atmosphere, hovering over New York City in a show of force. It was coordinating a massive counteroffensive against the surging human resistance. "This is our chance," Jake told his team as they donned experimental stealth suits. "We go in fast and quiet, find the power core, plant the charges, and get out." They launched from the shuttle, using gravity and momentum to guide their descent towards the massive Elysian vessel. The flagship loomed before them, its sleek hull jam packed with weaponry. Jake's heart pounded as they approached a maintenance hatch, praying their stealth technology would hold. With a soft hiss, the hatch opened. They were in. The interior of the Elysian ship was a maze of twisting corridors and pulsing energy conduits. Jake led the way, consulting the schematic they had memorized. They moved silently, avoiding patrols of towering Elysian soldiers. As they neared the power core, Jake noticed something odd. Some of the Elysian troops wore bulky suits that seemed to shimmer with energy. "They've adapted," Sarah whispered, noticing his gaze. "Those must be EMP resistant." Jake nodded grimly. This complicated things. They would need to rely even more on stealth and their human ingenuity to overcome the physically superior aliens. Suddenly an alarm blared. They had been detected. "Run!" Jake shouted, abandoning stealth for speed. They sprinted through the corridors, Elysian weapons fire scorching the walls around them. They burst into the power core chamber, a cavernous space dominated by a pulsing sphere of energy. Jake's team immediately set to work, planting explosive charges at key structural points. The chamber's doors blasted open. Elysian security forces poured in, their weapons charged and ready. Jake made a split-second decision. "Get those charges set," he ordered his team. "I'll hold them off." He charged towards the Elysian troops, using every trick and skill he had learned in years of combat. Jake ducked and weaved, using the alien size against them in the confined space. He grabbed a fallen Elysian weapon, its weight almost too much for him to lift, and opened fire. "Charges set," Michael called out. Jake glanced back, seeing his team ready to retreat. He knew what he had to do. "Go!" he shouted. "I'll make sure they detonate. Get out of here." Sarah hesitated, but Michael pulled her towards the exit. "Jake, no." "That's an order," Jake roared, unleashing another barrage against the oncoming Elysians. With anguished looks, his team retreated, leaving Jake alone in the heart of the enemy ship. He fought like a man possessed, using every surface and structure for cover. Elysian bodies littered the floor, but more kept coming. Jake's muscles burned, his lungs heaving as he pushed himself beyond his limits. The detonator felt heavy in his hand. Jake glanced at the timer. 30 seconds. He allowed himself a small smile. Whatever happened next, he had given Earth a fighting chance. The Elysian troops pressed closer, their weapons trained on Jake's position. He gripped the detonator tightly, ready for one final act of defiance. 20 seconds. Jake took a deep breath, preparing himself for what was to come. Come. His finger tightened on the detonator's trigger. 15 seconds. An Elysian soldier charged forward, its massive form towering over Jake. He ducked under its sweeping arm, using the alien's momentum to throw it off balance. Jake slammed the butt of his stolen weapon into the creature's midsection, hearing a satisfying crunch as it crumpled to the floor. 10 seconds. Jake's muscles screamed in protest as he vaulted over a control panel, narrowly avoiding a barrage of energy blasts. He rolled behind a pulsing energy conduit, feeling the heat of weapons fire sizzle past his face. The air crackled with ozone and the acrid smell of burning metal. 5 seconds. Jake's eyes darted around the chamber, searching for an escape route. The Elysian troops were closing in, their weapons trained on his position. He gritted his teeth, preparing for one final stand. 3, 2, 1. The world exploded. A blinding flash of light engulfed the power core chamber. The deafening roar of the explosion drowned out all other sounds. Jake felt the floor beneath him buckle and heave. He was thrown violently against a wall, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. As the initial blast subsided, Jake's Marine Corps training kicked in. Ignoring the pain lancing through his body, he scrambled to his feet. The chamber was in chaos. Alarms blared, emergency lights flashed, and fires raged unchecked. Elysian soldiers lay scattered across the floor, many unmoving. Jake seized his opportunity. He sprinted towards the exit, leaping over fallen debris and ducking under sparking cables. The ship shuddered around him, the destruction of its power core sending shockwaves through its massive structure. In the corridors, Jake encountered pockets of resistance. Elysian security forces, disoriented but still dangerous, attempted to block his path. He fought with a ferocity born of desperation, using every trick he had learned in years of combat. An Elysian soldier in an EMP-resistant suit lunged at Jake. He sidestepped, using the alien's momentum to slam it into a wall. Jake grabbed the creature's weapon, turning it against its former owner. The alien weapon was unwieldy in his hands, but at close range, it was devastatingly effective. Jake's lungs burned as he raced through the twisting passageways of the Elysian ship. He could feel the vessel breaking apart around him. Gravity seemed to shift and waver as the ship's systems failed. Jake used the disorientation to his advantage, pushing off walls and ceilings to propel himself forward. Finally, Jake reached the escape pod bay. His heart soared as he saw Sarah and Michael frantically working at the pod's controls. They looked up as he burst into the room, their faces a mix of relief and urgency. "Jake!" Sarah cried, her eyes wide with disbelief. "No time," Jake gasped, diving into the pod. "We need to go, now." Michael didn't need to be told twice. His fingers flew over the alien controls, their operation now familiar to him. The pod's hatch sealed with a hiss, just as another explosion rocked the ship. "Hang on!" Michael shouted as he punched the launch sequence. The escape pod shot out of the disintegrating Elysian flagship like a bullet from a gun. Through the pod's view screen, Jake watched as the massive alien vessel tore itself apart. The explosion created a spectacular light show against the backdrop of Earth's atmosphere. Their moment of triumph was short-lived. The pod shuddered violently as debris from the exploding flagship pelted its hull. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. "We're losing power," Michael yelled, his hands dancing over the controls. "The stabilizers are offline." Jake strapped himself in, his mind racing. "Can you get us down in one piece?" Michael's face was grim. "I'll do my best, but it's going to be rough." The escape pod entered Earth's atmosphere, trailing fire as it plummeted towards the surface. Inside, the team was thrown about as Michael struggled to maintain control. Jake could see the ground rushing up to meet them at an alarming rate. "Brace for impact," Jake shouted. The pod slammed into the earth with bone-jarring force. Jake's head snapped forward, then back. His vision blurred, and for a moment, everything went dark. When Jake came to, he found himself hanging upside down in his harness. The pod's interior was filled with smoke, sparks flying from damaged systems. He could hear Sarah coughing nearby. "Everyone okay?" Jake called out, his voice hoarse. "I'm all right," Sarah responded weakly. "Still breathing," Michael groaned. Jake fumbled with his harness, dropping unceremoniously to what was now the pod's ceiling. He helped Sarah and Michael free themselves, then forced open the pod's hatch. They emerged into chaos. The pod had crashed in what appeared to be Central Park, now a battlefield. In the distance, Jake could see the smoldering remains of the Elysian flagship scattered across the city. Closer at hand, human resistance fighters clashed with disoriented Elysian troops. Jake's team had barely taken in their surroundings when a familiar voice cut through the din of battle. "Jake, over here." Jake turned to see his brother, Alex, waving frantically from behind a makeshift barricade. Relief flooded through him as he led Sarah and Michael towards the human position. As they ran, Jake saw the effectiveness of Dr. Morales' portable EMP weapons. Human fighters wielded the devices with deadly efficiency, disabling Elysian energy weapons and armor. The aliens, caught off guard and without support from their flagship, were being pushed back. Jake and his team reached the barricade, collapsing behind it as energy blasts scorched the ground where they had been moments before. Alex embraced his brother fiercely. "I can't believe you made it," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. Jake grinned, despite the exhaustion and pain coursing through his body. "It'll take more than an alien invasion to keep me down." Their reunion was cut short by the sound of heavy weapons fire. Jake peered over the barricade to see a group of Elysian soldiers advancing, their EMP-resistant armor deflecting the Resistance's attacks. "We need to take out those armored units," Jake said, his tactical mind already formulating a plan. "Alex, do you have any heavier weapons?" Alex nodded, gesturing to a cache of equipment nearby. "We salvaged some Elysian tech. It packs a punch, but it's tricky to use." Jake hefted one of the alien weapons, feeling its weight. "Well, let's see if we can give them a taste of their own medicine." As Jake prepared to join the fray once more, he caught sight of a new threat looming on the horizon. Several Elysian ships, having regrouped after the flagship's destruction, began descending towards the city. Their weapons charged, ready to rain destruction upon the human forces below. Jake exchanged a grim look with his brother. The battle for Earth was a long way to go, and the next few hours would determine the fate of humanity. With restored dedication, Jake raised the alien weapon and prepared to fight for the future of his world. Jake's finger tightened on the trigger, ready to detonate the charges. Suddenly, the pod shuddered violently. The floor beneath them buckled and heaved, throwing Jake against the wall. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. Alarms blared as emergency lights flashed. Fires raged unchecked through the chamber. Jake scrambled to his feet, ignoring the pain lancing through his body. He sprinted towards the exit, leaping over fallen debris and ducking under sparking cables. In the corridors, Jake encountered pockets of resistance. He fought with desperation, using every combat skill he'd honed over years of training. An Elysian soldier in an EMP-resistant suit lunged at him. Jake sidestepped, slamming the alien into a wall and seizing its weapon. His lungs burned as he raced through the twisting passageways. The ship broke apart around him, gravity shifting and wavering as systems failed. Jake used the disorientation to his advantage, pushing off walls and ceilings to propel himself forward. He burst into the escape pod bay, relief flooding through him at the sight of Sarah and Michael working frantically at the controls. "Jake!" Sarah cried, her eyes wide with disbelief. "No time," Jake gasped, diving into the pod. "We need to go, now!" Michael's fingers flew over the alien controls. The pod's hatch sealed with a hiss, just as another explosion rocked the ship. "Hang on!" Michael shouted as he punched the launch sequence. The escape pod shot out of the disintegrating Elysian flagship. Through the view screen, Jake watched the massive alien vessel tear itself apart, creating a spectacular light show against Earth's atmosphere. Their triumph was short-lived. The pod shuddered as debris pelted its hull. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. "We're losing power," Michael yelled, his hands dancing over the controls. "The stabilizers are offline." Jake strapped himself in. "Can you get us down in one piece?" Michael's face was grim. "I'll do my best, but it's going to be rough." The escape pod entered Earth's atmosphere, trailing fire as it plummeted towards the surface. Inside, the team was thrown about as Michael struggled to maintain control. Jake could see the ground rushing up to meet them at an alarming rate. Suddenly, a modified Osprey aircraft appeared alongside them. Jake squinted through the pod's view screen, hardly daring to believe his eyes. The aircraft maneuvered closer, deploying grappling equipment that latched onto their pod. "It's Rodriguez!" Sarah exclaimed, recognizing the skilled pilot at the Osprey's controls. The Osprey's engines strained as it fought to stabilize the pod's descent. Jake felt the pod's trajectory shift, their fall becoming less steep. The ground still approached rapidly, but now with a controlled glide rather than a fatal plummet. "Brace for impact," Jake shouted as they neared the forested slopes of the Adirondack Mountains. The pod hit the ground hard, skidding through the underbrush before coming to a stop. Jake's head snapped forward, then back. His vision blurred, and for a moment, everything went dark. When Jake came to, he found himself hanging upside down in his harness. The pod's interior was filled with smoke, sparks flying from damaged systems. He could hear Sarah coughing nearby. "Everyone okay?" Jake called out, his voice hoarse. "I'm all right," Sarah responded weakly. "Still breathing," Michael groaned. Jake fumbled with his harness, dropping to what was now the pod's ceiling. He helped Sarah and Michael free themselves, then forced open the pod's hatch. They emerged into a small clearing surrounded by dense forest. The Osprey had landed nearby, its rotors still spinning. Rodriguez and his team rushed towards them, medical kits in hand. "Glad to see you made it," Rodriguez said, clasping Jake's shoulder. "We need to move quickly. This area won't stay secure for long." As the Resistance medics tended to their injuries, Jake heard the distant rumble of approaching Elysian ships. Rodriguez ushered them into the Osprey, his team working efficiently to secure the area and erase any signs of their presence. The aircraft lifted off just as the first Elysian scout ships appeared on the horizon. Rodriguez's piloting skills were put to the test as he navigated through the mountains, using the terrain to mask their heat signature and avoid detection. After a tense hour of low-altitude flying, they approached what looked like an abandoned mine entrance nestled in a remote valley. As they drew closer, a section of the mountainside shimmered and disappeared, revealing a hidden hangar. The Osprey touched down inside the concealed base. As the hangar doors sealed behind them, Jake saw a flurry of activity. Resistance fighters moved purposefully through the facility, carrying equipment and coordinating operations. Alex and Dr. Morales hurried towards them as they disembarked. Jake embraced his brother tightly, relief washing over him. "I knew you'd make it," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. Dr. Morales clasped Jake's hand firmly. "Your mission was a success, but we're not out of the woods yet. Come, we have much to discuss." They were led to a command center deep within the mountain. Holographic displays showed the positions of Elysian forces and the approaching reinforcements. The situation looked grim. "The destruction of their flagship has thrown the Elysians into disarray," Dr. Morales explained, "but they're regrouping quickly. We've detected a massive fleet entering the solar system. At their current speed, they'll reach Earth in less than 48 hours. Jake studied the displays, his mind racing. "What about the data we retrieved from the flagship? Can we use it?" Dr. Morales nodded, pulling up a new set of schematics. "We've analyzed it. Their technology is impressive, but not invulnerable. We believe we can expand our EMP technology to a global scale, but it would require precise coordination and timing." Jake's eyes widened as an audacious plan began to form in his mind. "What if we repurposed Earth's communication satellites, create a planet-wide electromagnetic pulse generator?" The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Morales stroked his chin thoughtfully. "It's possible, but the logistics would be incredibly complex. We'd need to modify hundreds of satellites simultaneously, all while defending against the Elysian ground forces." "I can lead a diversionary assault," Jake said, turning to Alex. "Keep them distracted while your team works on the modifications. What do you say, brother? Ready for one last fight?" Alex grinned, the fire of tenacity burning in his eyes. Always. As Dr. Morales and his team began the monumental task of reprogramming Earth's satellite network, Jake and Alex prepared for battle. They donned the latest armor developed by the Resistance, incorporating salvaged Elysian technology. "Just like old times," Alex said as they checked their weapons. Jake nodded, a hint of a smile on his face. "Let's hope we're not too rusty." They emerged from the hidden base with a strike force of Resistance fighters. Their mission, to engage the Elysian ground forces and prevent them from detecting the satellite modifications. The brothers fought side by side, their complementary skills making them a formidable duo. Jake's close-quarters combat expertise paired perfectly with Alex's sharpshooting abilities. They moved like a well-oiled machine, cutting through Elysian defenses with ruthless efficiency. As they pushed deeper into enemy territory, Jake caught glimpses of the larger battle unfolding around the globe. Holographic updates showed Earth's remaining military forces engaging the Elysian fleet near Mars's orbit. The human ships were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with fierce perseverance, buying crucial time for the completion of Jake's plan. Hours passed in a blur of combat. Jake's muscles ached, his lungs burned, but he pushed on. They couldn't afford to fail, not when they were so close. Finally, a transmission crackled through their comms. It was Dr. Morales, his voice tense but triumphant. "Satellite network is ready. Prepare for activation in 60 seconds. Jake and Alex shared a look of grim satisfaction. They had done their part. Now it was time to see if their gamble would pay off. "All units, take cover and shield your eyes," Jake ordered, pulling Alex behind a fallen Elysian war machine. The seconds ticked down. Jake held his breath, every fiber of his being focused on this moment. A blinding flash lit up the sky, followed by a visible wave of electromagnetic energy that rippled across the globe. It expanded outward into space, enveloping the planet in a shimmering barrier. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then chaos erupted. Elysian ships in orbit and in the approaching fleet suddenly lost power, drifting helplessly. On the ground, alien weapons and technology ceased functioning, leaving the invaders vulnerable. Jake emerged from cover, surveying the suddenly silent battlefield. Elysian soldiers stood frozen, their advanced armor now nothing more than dead weight. He turned to Alex, a fierce grin spreading across his face. "It worked. Now let's finish this." As they prepared to launch the final counterattack, Jake knew the real challenge was just beginning. They had won a crucial victory, but the fate of humanity still hung in the balance. The next few hours would determine whether Earth would fall or rise anew from the ashes of invasion.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.